we're gonna be looking for Jock 9. That's gonna be TerrOr. Okay, cool. That should be fun. So this is Flash versus TerrOr. TerrOr, a pretty well-known streamer in the Africa circles. If you know anything about TerrOr, it's all about that soy sauce incident where he got in trouble. He actually got banned from Africa for pouring soy sauce like all over like these kids, which made absolutely no sense. I have no idea what that was. It was the weirdest thing I'd ever seen. But if you know anything about TerrOr, it's that he's a pretty weird guy. But overall, a pretty decent player. Obviously, nowhere near the caliber of Flash. So we should be having a pretty fun game. If you saw me, I casted last week some games of Flash versus Brittany, where Flash handicapped himself by killing an SCV early on, and that was absolutely hilarious. So I should be able to see some fun stuff coming out from this one as well. Obviously, Flash a little bit less confident against TerrOr, so he's not going to be killing off the SCV early on. Not going to be handicapping himself, and this should be pretty interesting to see nonetheless. Whenever Flash plays against inferior opponents, he usually plays actually a little bit better than normal, because he's having to play. He not only wants to crush his opponent, but he generally plays dumb and plays from behind. So you end up seeing his mechanics really shine through when he finds out that he's behind and realizes that he has to pick up the pace and catch up. So it's one of those really nice things about Flash when he's playing against lesser players, where normally people would just kind of play like clowny and then just kind of give up and be like, ah, whatever, it was a loss. Flash really does kick it into overtime when he starts to fall behind, and that's awesome to see. Really cool to see. So it looks like we're not going to be having a gas for Flash. Flash is going to be going for that fast expand, which I guess is not surprising. This is a TVZ versus TerrOr, so basic gasless expansion. Doesn't see anything from his opponent. He sees the Overlord down there on the bottom left-hand corner, so he knows his opponent spawned in the bottom right. You know that based on the travel time of the Overlord, it takes a certain amount of time for the Overlord to actually travel to that side of the base, so you can actually pretty accurately predict where your opponent is going to be. He sees the hatch first, so he knows what's up. Not going to be surprised to see this. This drone is just trying to get as much damage in on this SCV as possible. And so far, TerrOr doing actually a pretty decent job at getting the moving shots on the SCV, getting some damage in. The SCV really wants to get into the main, but I have a feeling that either Flash is trying to put himself at a disadvantage, or he suspects that there's probably going to be a drone on the ramp anyway. So he's not going to try to get into the main right away and get scouting information, but eventually he does need to get in there, find out what his opponent is doing. TerrOr doing a fantastic job of these moving shots on this drone. Going to be able to actually whittle away this SCV very, very quickly, make it get quite low. And this is a fun little mini game that's going on. In the meantime, Flash is just going to be going for that gas, probably going to be seeing the fast eBay going for the +1 5 racks, which is the standard for Flash. Because Flash has waited so long, there are going to be some Zerglings on the ramp be able to take that out, and Flash doesn't have a whole bunch of scouting information. Let's see if he decides to play in the dark, or if he's going to go ahead and send out a secondary SCV scout. Normally you would send out a second SCV scout. Make sure you get some information on your opponent. You really want to find out what sort of tech they're going. You want to know if your opponent's stockpiling a bunch of lings. So at this point, if you send out an SCV to go hide out on the map, you can go find out if your opponent, you can go in there a little bit later and just see if your opponent is going for the fast speed, trying to trick you out with a very mass ling build coming out your way. But it is going to be that +1 5 racks that's going to be coming out from Flash. Not a surprise. This is the way that he likes to play. Does Flash still stick to SK Terran, or does he go mech like everyone else? Flash definitely has found a lot of comfort recently in going into SK Terran, but I think pretty much everyone has decided that SK Terran into mech is pretty strong. You still eventually want to transition into mech. There are a couple of plays that I've seen that are very nice against late game Zerg, where potentially, like for instance last week I cast a game where Light actually went into nukes instead of going into mech, and that was a different way for him to go ahead and break the fourth bases. The problem that you run into with SK Terran is unless you get an early advantage, if the Zerg ever actually stabilizes and gets 4 bases, if the Zerg ever actually stabilizes and gets 4 bases and 4 gases up, you can't actually deal with mass ultralists unless you have tanks. If you're trying to deal with mass ultralists with just Marines and you don't have like a way superior economy or a way superior production, then you run into a lot of troubles against the power of those units. So you have to really eventually transition into mech. But the way that Light played it was he actually got nukes instead of going into mech, which allowed him to go ahead and start breaking the fourth base early, because obviously the nukes bypass the Dark Swarms. They kill off all of the lurkers without any problem. So it's one of those really cool things that I saw might be an interesting way to transition from SK Terran in a way that's not mech. You may decide to go into nukes and just stay with the SK Terran. But I think SK Terran style is just very, very powerful, especially if you open up with this +1 5-Rex. Since you have so much bio out on the field, you can go ahead and go into that quadruple drop ship, and that just puts so much pressure on your opponent as the Zerg player, because you're splitting in so many ways as the Zerg player against SK Terran. You have to make sure that you are prepared to deal with those big frontal assaults, especially if your opponent builds up a lot of science vessels. You have to have the lurkers in position to deal with that. You have to have the defilers in position to deal with that. But at the same time, you also have to be aware of drops. So you have to make at least 1 to 2 pairs of Scourge in each base, as well as potentially leave a couple of Lings in both your main and your third. Because if you don't, you find yourself in a lot of trouble. So Flash doing a pretty good job moving out right now. Normally, the Mutalisks are out before this group is able to actually push out across the map. Terror's Mutalisks feel a little bit late, but I suppose that's not a huge deal. In any case, the +1 5-Rex is very, very strong. +1 just finished. So at this point, these Marines are going to be shredding through any Mutalisks they find. But this one group of Marines out in the middle of the map is an island. They are definitely in danger of being picked off and cleaned up very quickly. And so far, TerrOr doing a really good job of doing that, being able to clean up quite a few of them, but still a couple more units still alive over there. It's going to take a while for for TerrOr to actually clean that up. I'm sorry, Effort is like always my go-to when I can't remember someone's name. I just call them Effort for some reason. So Flash going ahead and scouting out the third base location up in the top right. Doesn't see anything, so he's probably going to be gunning it for the lower left-hand corner. Normally what you'll see is a lot of Terran players will send out an SCV by the time that they push out with their first group of Marine Medic, and that just allows them to go ahead and get a good idea of what their opponent's doing. But in this particular case, since Flash was going for 5-Rex, a little bit of a riskier push out, he decided to go ahead and instead just send a Marine up there while going ahead and pushing down this bottom left-hand corner. But nothing up here looks like, and if there was, it probably just got canceled. So Flash is going to be going back up to the top right. This is the way Flash really likes to play this matchup. You see a lot of Terran players that might try to gun it for the natural, try to get a lot of damage done, but Flash actually in a lot of trouble, losing a lot of bio out here in the front, and his reinforcements are going to be pretty nicely holed up in between the barracks right there, but he's got a lot of units in his natural and his main right now. He's going to have to come back with his main force instead of taking out the third base, and this was a really nice backstab from TerrOr. This is one of the things that we've been seeing a lot more often from Zerg players too, is just going for these big backstabs and sacrificing a third base, and that's really cool to see from TerrOr. So he's going to be able to get a lot of damage done. Eventually it's going to get cleaned up, but it's forced Flash to pull everything back, and in the meantime he hasn't been able to stop a potential third base from going down in the top right hand corner. We got the double starports coming down right now, and the science facility is going to be going down now as well. So most likely we're probably going to be seeing the first 2 units out of those starports being science vessels. You very rarely see 2 dropships early. Usually it's the first 2 science vessels to allow them to go ahead and start building up energy, allow them to get ready to go for those early irradiates. uh, sorry, excuse me, and break the fourth base before it really gets off the ground, or even potentially break the third base before it gets off the ground. But when you go for the fast dropships, it's a little bit risky while these mutalisks are still on the map. You can still play around the mutalisks to some degree, but it's a lot better to have just a lot stronger ground force, especially when you know your opponent has a bunch of lurkers out on the map, hidden in the ground. That's a ton of lings coming out from TerrOr, so Flash needs to be a little bit careful with the way that he micros this. If he doesn't micro it properly, he's going to be in a lot of trouble, but this is going to actually be the dropships first, so like I said, that we don't normally see it because it's a little bit risky, but Flash is totally prepared with this. He feels pretty confident that he can deal with this, and tons of lurkers up on this high ground, which means Flash actually might just be going for a big drop in the main, maybe elevating in from that natural. And where are the mutalisks for TerrOr? It looks like TerrOr lost a lot of mutalisks and didn't actually replace it, so Flash is going to be in a pretty fantastic position. He's going to go ahead and get that machine shop on his factory, which is going to allow him to go ahead and go into the potential mech switch coming out pretty shortly. Pretty good storm coming down so far. That's going to push this back for now, but are they going to get right on top of that? Oh, wow. That's so unfortunate. So, unfortunately, that Defiler goes down for TerrOr, and he's not going to have a lot of defense over here. They're basically now going down for Flash. He's going to be able to go ahead and start pumping out a lot of units coming out pretty soon. Start getting ready for that mech switch with the third gas. And now he's just trying to put pressure on his opponent and force out a lot of Defilers, force out any mistakes that he can find. But at this point in the game, he really doesn't have to do any damage. Normally, again, this is one of those things where Flash will just go ahead and control the map. He's going to go ahead and spend his first couple of irradiates on the mutalisks, which I think is a pretty smart decision. It basically just allows him to slow down the potential drop pressure, and behind this he's going to be going ahead and starting up the mech switch, which is going to be very, very powerful coming in. Looks like he might actually be going for the double drop into the fourth base over here, sorry, the third base, but a couple of, wow, those are pretty amazing Scourge. Going to be able to pick out one of those dropships. What has Flash done before behind this? Looks like he's just going to be focusing heavily on getting a strong ground army. And here's the liftoff. Here's the mech switch, as he has a pretty strong ground army so far. So the real key to having a strong ground army in this matchup is just making sure that you have 2 to 3 groups of Marine Medic and then at least 4 Science Vessels. Once you have that, you can basically deal with anything on the ground. Lings can't really touch that number of bio. Mutalisks can't get near that. You can't micro the Mutalisks without actually dying to irradiate. So that's one of those really nice things about having the Science Vessels. They basically shut down a lot of options for the Zerg player. They really can't get anything done. And as long as you leave them in a very forward position, allow your Marines to be very aggressive out on the map, and also having this dropship also allows them to continue to put pressure out on the map. It really prevents you from dying to a Defiler, Lurker, Ling push. I watched a couple days, In Control just died to a very, or sorry, Artosis rather, just died to a very basic push that just came out across the map because he just didn't have anything to deal with it. But in this particular case, Flash is just going to be controlling the front. He's spending energy to kill off gas units, and that's a really big deal because this is basically a free trade for him. Right now, everything is going to be a free trade for him for quite a while as he switches into mech. The Vultures are going to be pushing out across the map. They're just going to be going and laying down lots of spider mines over by this fourth base while the rest of his army pressures out at the front. And that's going to be very nice for him, just allowing him to continually trade for units, both Lings and Defilers and Lurkers, with the units that he has, and slow down the gas economy of the Zerg player. Because Zerg really, they have to continually make Lurkers and Defilers to defend at this point in time. And they don't really have the gas income to support getting the Ultralisk plus upgrades on top of that. So basically this is a moment in time where you're pretty safe to go ahead and switch to mech without making any units at all, because you have very cost-efficient units. You have very strong units that can deal with whatever Zerg can throw at you before the Ultras get out. So it's really nice. And at this point, now that Flash can't really stop the 4th base from going down anymore, he's just going to be focusing on controlling the center of the map and getting tons and tons of tanks and vultures up. It just allows him to, before the Zerg player can get all 4 gases and get all of that mining and all of that gas income up, he's going to have a ton of units out on the map before then. So it's a very smart play coming out from Flash, and this is just such a genius transition that really didn't actually get invented until this year. It really wasn't a very stable it wasn't a very stable transition until Flash really invented it this year. So it's been really nice to see the way that Flash is actually doing this. So doing a pretty fantastic job of cleaning up those units. Did get plagued pretty brutally. That's one of those things that eventually Plague will clean up all these bioforces because of how cost efficient it is. It just completely annihilates that entire force, runs the medics out of energy, and then all you have to do is run a couple lings in, snipe it. And a lot of Flash's stuff is hurting right now, but as you can see, he's going ahead and expanding very aggressively behind this minimal amounts of pressure, and that's going to allow him to just have a very strong economy once he gets up to where he needs to be. But Ultra's already out on the map. Normally this is not what you see. Usually Zerg's players like to bank a lot of gas and go for pushes at the 4th bases or try to cut in, but going straight for the throat over here. And so far lots of spider mines going off. The spider mines are going to be heroes right here, and the Ultras are going to be able to drag some of these mines into the tank, so that's very nicely done. And this is actually really smart from TerrOr to just go for very early Ultras like this. Normally you don't see the Ultras come out this early, but oh, big plague coming down there, and that's gonna make those basically dead as hell. He's trying to irradiate a couple of Scourge to kill him off, or at least cause a little bit of splash damage, but in this case it honestly doesn't matter too much because Flash is already making the Valkyrie transition. Valkyries are sort of the late game transition that you go to instead of Science Vessels. Even though Science Vessels are very, very strong against basically everything the Zerg has, they do fail at certain points in time as far as killing off units for free. They're not as multi-purpose against the Mutalists. You can go into a very big Mutalist switch and kill off your opponent quite easily with just a handful of mutas, but with the Valkyries you can't actually defend very well or attack very well with the Mutalists, because the Mutalists can't pull back if one is irradiated. They are just basically pushed back and they're completely dead. Now this may look like a lot of trouble for Flash, but Flash is actually in a pretty decent spot overall. He just has to defend long enough to establish and stabilize these bases down in the bottom left hand corner, and he'll be okay. But he is running into a little bit of a problem where he's not quite able to defend against these Ultras. He didn't quite have the tank numbers in time. He's going to continue to go ahead and try and reinforce over this space, but it looks like he may have to give up the high ground. And this is actually where it gets really bad, because losing the high ground at this point in time is not very beautiful. You have to that's the place where you have all your tanks. That's where you have a whole bunch of ground forces that are very, very strong. It allows you basically to have a stronghold. But wow, these Ultras getting on top of the tanks over here as well. So Flash is actually in a really, really bad spot right now, and TerrOr's probably expanding over his entire side of the map pretty soon because he's done so much damage from this. Yeah, there's the GG. TerrOr actually playing a fantastic game versus Flash. It's actually insane.